Hello, everyone. This is Janet here, Lessins, Aquarian Radio, aquarianradio.com. Today is an episode of We the Anunnaki with my co-host, Sasha Lessins. And my speaker is working. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Janet.
You can hear me. Okay, so maybe it's me. I can't hear Sasha. Can you hear me?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Now it's working. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarian Radio, aquarianradio.com. I'm your Spreaker lesson with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and my very special guest, Glenn Bogue. And I apologize, I didn't know if it was broadcasting or not. I know I hear myself talking through the phones.
If this is Aquarian Radio, are we underwater?
Yeah, we're underwater. Anyway, today we're focusing on the Anunnaki. We the Anunnaki. And so this is an ongoing dialogue that we're having with a number of different Anunnaki authors and researchers. And this week we have Glenn Bogue with us and Dr. Sasha Lesson, and I'm not sure if Robert Evans Jr. will join us, but we are here. Dr. Lesson, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I've been immersed in the material about the Anunnaki, that is these people, tall people, long-lived, who came from Nibiru to Earth, and the effect that they've had on this planet. And of course, they adapted their genome to this planet. And I've been really researching what was really all behind that. One of the things is Nibiru, home planet, was under great threat. They didn't know if it was going to survive or not. As a matter of fact, they even sent their expedition to Earth. That's how those guys came here in the first place, to get gold, to make a sort of a halo of floated white monoatomic gold around their planet. But the point was, they didn't really know Nibiru was going to, and civilization there was going to survive. And the genius geneticists that actually came here, they went way beyond what their orders were, which was to get gold and bring it back. They were determined to create creatures that were not only adapted to Earth, their own genome, but that would do better than them, because they were disgusted at their society. Their society was a military dictatorship, and they had almost annihilated themselves with a nuclear war, and there was great infertility, and they did not know if they were going to survive, and women were counted as nothing. They were just ground under in this society, and it was it had a very pronounced class system, and the ordinary people were not pleased with this at all. And so Enki, who's a scientist, his sister Ninmah, and his son Ningishzidda decided not only would they make us, and they had to make us short term, or they never sell the product to the commander, who didn't even want slaves, which is, he bought the project. Okay, well, we'll make slaves after Enki had engineered a mutiny, but he didn't want them in the first place. But that was how they sold it to him. Look, they'll be short term, but they didn't count on how empathic and how we have been programmed to do better than our makers. That's my opening.
Okay, and Glenn, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Janet. I always appreciate Dr. Lesson's approaches to the introductions to our show, which I have always believed the knowledge that we're bringing forward is the most advanced on the planet. And when Dr. Lesson refers to the fact that Homo sapiens sapiens has this ability it's hidden, because we're only using about 7% of our capacity. It's hidden there. This doubling of the spirit, it does occur in the Old Testament between what we said last week, between Elijah and Elisha, that when the when the master teaches the student so well that the student can go past the master receives a doubling of the spirit. And I think this was somewhat behind the thinking of Enki, Ninmah, and Ningishzidda, that this was a way forward for their civilization to finally progress, and progress out of a civil war that they brought here to this planet. And so now, if we look at the history of mankind, we are seeing constantly civil wars, and often in the last 200 years, wars that are in fact financed by the same families in Europe, and they finance both sides of these wars to keep their old pattern going. But it's coming to a head shortly, as we'll discuss in tonight's show.
Yes, and that's what we need to talk about. I have this really interesting article. I'm going to do another show on how the crown rules the world. And I can't find the author, Mark Owen. I wanted to bring him on the show, but it's phenomenal about how this operates with the city of London. And since you're a lawyer, you might understand that you are actually, as a lawyer, have pledged your allegiance to the the temple bar. Pledge allegiance.
The round towers, the Bank of Settlements in Europe and the Bank of Settlements, which is the international bank of the IMF that settles all these debts in the world. It's a debt-based system. They are round buildings, mirroring the Templar a church or temple that was Templar in London is a circular building. Oh, yes. Temple bar that allegedly now, I don't know this for sure, allegedly all the bars of North America, when you're a member of the bar, you're a member of that group in England. Right. It's the Bar Association franchises. The Temple Bar is comprised of 4 inns of court. They are the Middle Temple, Inner Temple, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn. The entry point to these closed secret societies is only to be found when one is called to their bar. So that's what the bar attorneys in the United States owe their allegiance and pledge their oaths to the crown. We are still a colony. We didn't. And this whole thing, they said that the Declaration of Independence was created to pacify the populace.
You know, Janet, my dad was a lawyer, and I really knew that the judges and the lawyers all were pledged to the bar. I mean, they were so drunk.
But besides that part. But this is another bar, honey.
The drunkenness of the lure of money. And there is a reporter like Diane Sawyer here in Canada, Amanda Lang, and she wrote a book called Why and Why Not. And in there she makes a stunning assertion, quite casually, that when males get this taste for a lot of money in a business transaction, they consume that into their core being, in their solar plexus, and it really begins to take over the whole organism. And I think that the lawyers are in that genre of being sworn to the Bar of England, and that's, of course, where the Federal Reserve Bank has its headquarters, is at the Golden Mile in the City of London. And those two go hand in hand. The lawyers called to the bar will feed at that trough of money and will worship it and will use it as a tool of suppression.
That indeed, and money is a major tool of suppression. It keeps us in the slave matrix, and that goes all the way back to the Anunnaki. So, what direction do you want to go today? You guys figure it out. I'm here.
Well, I would like to say that I think we have already superseded our parent culture. We have developed ethics. We have people that are self-reflexive. We have parliaments that reflect to some degree people's opinions. We have, in certain leading countries, we have children's rights. And we start feeling the pain of animals. And there's certainly women's rights have improved. Minority rights have improved in some countries. Now, the whole hasn't gone over this way, but we have already, in many places, done way better than Anunnaki and the Nibiruans, in my humble opinion.
Well, let's look at that. We've got all these children at that are basically refugees, and they're down there trying to survive. Their very lives are at stake. They've escaped these countries in South America. They've witnessed their families be annihilated. They're running for their lives, and here they reach the land of plenty, so to speak, the Statue of the Golden Gates, and they're being.
Did I lose her? What happened? You pushed the talk button again. Do you know that?
No, she's on speaker.
No, I don't hear her.
I know, but maybe you lost the connection.
I'll have to call it again then.
Make sure that
Do you have a redial?
No, you have to dial all this again.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. Hello, can you hear us? Sorry about that. We're being muted. Let me try the telephone. Okay. Sasha, talk on that. Yes. Okay. Go in the other room and talk.
Go in the other room? Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to try to get Glenn, if you can hear the show, call back in, please. Glenn, call back in. We got booted. Aloha, everybody. My apologies. So we just got booted, and I think that's Glenn coming back.
I am back, Janet.
Okay, so Sasha, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, now we're all here again. Okay.
And I think
Sorry
we were
about
just
that.
booted. We were getting very close to a very primal truth.
We got booted. Yes.
Where I got booted, what I was saying is, this is our chance, America, to realize our unity as humanity and reach out for these children and celebrate them. Do you know they come from the Mayan area, and they're not just Spanish speakers. Spanish is great. You learn all kinds of things, but the Maya have this oral tradition. We can learn so much from these kids. They are a treasure. What's the matter with you? Don't oppose them. Welcome them. Bienvenidos.
Well, let's go on to that a little further because of our show last week and the duality of these children that they face. The first is their tremendous Maya traditions, which are largely unknown to the Western world because they were, of course, their books were burned over a 72-hour period by the Bishop of Mexico City. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know what those ancient texts taught, but we do know that the new Christian religion was foisted upon them by Cortez and Pizarro et al. Mm-hmm. But the saving grace in there was this mysterious appearance of this woman at Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe, which the Catholic Church was quick to assert was the Virgin Mother. But I have reasons in my research to believe that it was somebody else, because that woman who appeared spoke in the native language, Nahuatl, is the ancient language of the Mayans, so that the Spanish-speaking conquistadors would not know what she had said to the young man Juan Diego who received her messages. And now in the show last week, Janet was quick to send me the videotape of this starship that was found allegedly now on the backside of the moon. It's allegedly. It was found by Apollo 20. And when I see the picture on the video of the female body that was in that spaceship, allegedly, it matches the only picture we have of this Virgin Mary or Virgamara or this woman. The only picture we have of her is on the Tilmud, the cape of Juan Diego. Her face was embossed on the inside. Her image was embossed on the inside of the cape, is still there. in Mexico City, incorrupt. And that face matches exactly this starship image of what an Anunnaki looked like.
Wow.
Right. And people may not realize that this is Apollo 20 is supposed to be a secret mission that the Apollo did not stop after, forget what the last one was, 15, 16, right? So they kept going because they found this city on the far. They found a giant spaceship, and in the spaceship they went a joint Russian-U.S. mission, went back, and they found this woman, and they actually found a couple of different people. She was intact. The other people were in bits. There was another video I found. I don't know if I sent you that one, Glenn. It's on the extraterrestrialcontact.com. That's another stuff of ours, Extraterrestrial Contact. I put these videos up there, and I do recommend anybody listening, go watch them right away. We never know when they're going to get pulled down because we have the powers that be that don't want us to connect the dots. But take a look at this image. It's so profound of this woman. And what I had found that I was unable to send to Glenn because they'd taken it down is a similar image of a giant statue, much like the statues you see of the Olmecs in South America. You know, it's just the head. Well, there was a giant head of the same woman that's on the moon, and she's frozen, so she's preserved. It looks exactly like her, but the statue on Mars has giant horns, the horns of Hathor, and the goddess Hathor is Ninmah. So we have all these, we're connecting all these points here, like the dots.
Yeah, and what's fascinating what Dr. Lessin just said, I was in contact with Ellen Brown, a lawyer in L.A. This past week, and she was writing in her younger years. She writes about the central bank in public bank in the United States. But she has an earlier passion for the Anunnaki and writing about this bicameral brain that we have, that the right brain used to be in touch with the gods and took directions like dictation that was passed over to the left brain and then just administered like a little robot. And at some point in our history, that voice shut off, and the brain goes back and forth in an uncertain state. So when I see all these children, I just drove from Philadelphia to Toronto to be on this show today, and I heard all the talk radio shows going about the children being sent all over the U.S. now on airplanes and buses, and half the time you're thinking the children should be welcomed into the community, and the other half of the community is saying, no, they should be sent back. And we're going back and forth and back and forth. What we're watching is the fact that the United States is the country where this battle is going to be fought. And it's going to be fought not by these children, but by what they represent. And that is the old Maya, Inca, Anunnaki teachings from way back versus the Vatican teaching of Cortez and Pizarro.
Yeah, and it's like throughout our history, the Catholic Church has been suppressing every time the true history. And that's what I'm getting is that Ningishzidda, Thoth, and Ninmah have specifically said they want us to know the truth of our origins and to free us from the Catholic Church and Enlil and his control by fear mechanisms.
Yeah.
Right. So Enlil sent his Catholic Church minions out to conquer the globe, and every time they found any kind of writings or artifacts to the Enki clan, they eradicated, and they're still eradicating these symbols. You see, in the other day they destroyed those giant statues about 10 years ago.
The Taliban destroyed the statues of Buddha, who was another person who, and that's the whole thing. You don't have to be stuck in your left or right brain. There's many ways that you can bring them together in a higher synthesis. And there's many meditative and journey work, and through the chakras you can learn, especially in Tantra, how to access that
thing that Julian Jaynes has said long ago we lost, which was contact with higher levels of consciousness. But it's there. It's there for us to grasp again.
Dr. Lessing, you've done it again. Julian Jaynes was the scientist or author that the lawyer in L.A. was referring to.
Oh, my goodness.
And now we're finding our balance back because we really are off balance. But when you speak about tantric and you speak about sexual practices and you think about females being superior to males, this is not part of the American genre right now. We're moving from the NFL to World Cup soccer.
Oh, listen, I got to tell you,
that's not what a male is in the United States. And then pornography, whenever they get a chance at work. This is where we are, but we're learning to move left brain, right brain, left brain, up from that in these meditative struggles we're going throughout the continent.
Yeah, I
what
wanted
to
say
say
that being able to appreciate the feminine, which we have failed to do, we've grounded under. In my research, what I found is that the story was that first they were making both the Adam and the Eve, the first Adam and first Eve. They both had XX and XX chromosomes, and they weren't getting any reproduction. And then the genius Ningishzidda found what it was to get and altered the first Eve, whose name was Tiamat, and she was carried by a surrogate mother, Enki's wife, Damkina. And so when this child was born, Tiamat, she was way precocious, and in a very famous tab that I've been studying, she's made a little basket, and she's made an apron. And so the next-door neighbor, Enki lived in this place, Basara nowadays, but it was called Eridu. And next-door neighbor was the commander, old Commander Enlil. And Enlil came over, and he saw this little teenager with all this clothes that she made and little tables and stuff. And he said, "What is this? What is this creature doing?" And she said, "I'm Tiamat, and I made this." And I feel so good. I made love with Adamu, and I'm just so happy. And boy, was Enlil mad. Anyway, that's another story.
No, it's a key
But the
key
point
story
is that
again,
the women were, and so so anyway, I should tell you the rest of the story. So Enlil immediately has Enki put in a chamber where he can't move, and he's tied up, and he's right there. He puts a field around him, and his hands and feet are tethered, and the little girl is aghast. She's staring in this scene. The neighbor came over and tied up my daddy and put him in this shielded chamber, and she's wearing clothes, and little Adam is naked, and he's just dog. What the fuck's up with you? And
honey, don't swear.
Like, what the heck is happening?
Yes, please.
Anyway,
go ahead. Back to the story.
Well, how key, Sasha, is the apron? Because apron is, of course, a centerpiece of the Masons, and no one is say whether the Freemasons, George Washington was of course has his famous portrait done.
Oh yeah.
And now is this an emblem that the Freemasons tried to suppress, or that they're confused about? Because Margaret Starbird in Portland, Oregon, who writes about the Magdalene, is saying that they're calling her the Freemasons because they have dropped the ball. They have lost the secret. They're stumbling around in the dark trying to find the meaning of the apron.
Wow.
Well, that should be the cloth that she started to. I don't think she was ashamed of herself. I think she actually was adorning and highlighting that she had this volta, that it was magical.
Absolutely.
And it was Stargate.
Now
and she was
absolutely
conscious.
She was celebrating it.
No, well, so this is why George Washington would be wearing the apron, because they're trying to promote the fact that the male phallus is the superior image, and this is what's pounded home today on the internet, on porn sites, that it's the male phallus that's being satisfied, when the cosmic trigger clearly anatomically is the clitoris.
Yeah.
The wand or the lingam is the instrument of encouragement.
And so if you look, and so what happens with this idea of sin and stuff, that's from the guys that are in Enlil's camp, and they're looking back at, but the Anunnaki didn't regard sex as sin. They never did. That's just something that Yahweh Enlil added later. She was not doing anything, and it's leaves. Her apron is of leaves, and she's happy.
Let me read from this what we did this morning. This was a show we did earlier today. Tiamat and Adama at Enki Settlement developed self-reflective capacities. Now conscious of soul connection in their sexuality, Tiamat and Adama awakened to higher consciousness. They discovered bliss in their sexuality. Tiamat built little tables of branches and adorned her loins to sprayed her sexual awareness in a leaf apron. She made Tiamat's the first hybrid to distinguish me, other, inside me, outside me, my body, your body, my vulva, your lingam, supreme, great, and normal baseline. And through her body, her internal senses, she went through a consciousness opening that changed her life, and she really would never be the same again. In joy, she adorned her body, especially the part that gave her this mind-blowing, blissful, and ecstatic experience. With joy and bliss, she adorned herself. With pride and intelligence, her new mental acuity, she distinguished and singularized her newly felt body and vulva. In exaltation, she adorned herself. So that was, I don't know where you're quoting this from, but that was powerful.
That's
she would
Chris Hardy's DNA of the Gods.
DNA of the Gods.
Now
Chris Hardy.
But you're also,
DNA of the Gods.
Janet, you're quoting from the sexual poem of the thrice great Hermes, which I suspect, and she took a substance from her body into her hand, and from her hand into his mouth, and from his mouth into her mouth. It's there in my book 3 on sacred sex, published in I think 2011. So I can't be making this up. I can't be making this up tonight. You're getting it from a different source, and the very ancient. The leaves, of course. People don't realize that the minerals around the earth can be taken into the body only through the plant kingdom. And so I think she's giving the message through the leaves that through the greenery and the plants, this is how the minerals are taken from the soil, and the plant can add 10 or 12 different enzymes, which is just frozen light or light that's been slowed down from the sun in different colors. But they add these enzymes to the rock and make this absorbable. Because the 8 precious metals, gold, or silver, platinum, iridium, ruthenium, there's 8 of them that are by themselves on the chemical chart. And these have 3 properties. One is to raise intelligence. The second is to reverse DNA. And the third has quantum properties, anti-gravitational, opening the Stargate. And so there is word that some kind of levitation's involved there, but that the Pope John Paul II learned how to levitate, but also did Saint Teresa of Lisieux. She was often found at the ceiling of the convent, and they had to pull her back down.
Wow! So tell me how Pope.
In the movie When Harry Met Sally, I'll have what she's having.
Yes. Interesting. Yes. So how did Pope John Paul learn how to levitate?
Well, this is among the priests and brotherhood of the Vatican, and so without getting too far off topic, I suspect that there's another backdoor avenue which has to do with blood and has to do with the adrenal glands of either animals or even perhaps young children, because the allegations these days of the Vatican are getting stronger and stronger as people become more brave to come forward and report what they've seen in their lives. There's these Magdalene laundries that are famous in Ireland, and women, of course, were suppressed for centuries in these laundries, and they were children who were taken from around the Great Britain and taken in. They were orphans and taken in these laundries and forced to do all kinds of brutal things. And now these people are finding avenues to come forward after a life of experience of abuse by the church. And what the reporting is pretty graphic. And
we've actually interviewed Judith Byington, who talks about how the Pope, in order to become Pope, has to sacrifice a child and let Satan possess him. And so the evidence is, like you say, mounting. It is something terrible happening by very people that do not respect consciousness at all.
But the fear instilled in the child is what they're after. When you instill the fear, something happens in the pineal gland, in the hypothalamus, in the adrenal system, because they still don't know. In my research, they don't know exactly what hormones are made of. It's a sacred, holy substance. It's just a little wee chemical, but its power is beyond the human comprehension. But when you put that fear into a being, and then you consume a liquid from there, perhaps blood, because blood carries these things with it, then these male-dominated groups are trying to find, I think, what's available with the females, but somehow they don't go that route. They go this other perverted route.
Right, they go for the men. So what's going on with the plane being shot down, all this bombing in Israel, I guess, and it seems like they're upping the fear ante for some reason, and needing more and more control. To,
well, I just finished Naomi Klein, the Canadian journalist. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning, number one bestseller, New York Times-winning journalist from Canada. She wrote a book called Shock Doctrine, and reporting at the end of the book that Israeli companies were going broke in the dot-com burst, the bubble that burst in the 1990s. They were heavily involved in the tech industry in the Silicon Valley of California. And as that bubble burst, the whole economy in Israel was going down the tubes. And they reached quickly for homeland security type principles, which, of course, are driven by a terrorist, fear-based mentality. So the more fear, oddly now, they used to think in Israel, we need peace to encourage trade in the region. They now realize they don't need peace. The more disruption they have to peace, I don't want to say war, but bombs and invasions, and the more you have of this kind of thing, the better it is for the bottom line for the top 350 companies in Israel. Now, that's a very difficult statement to make. I didn't make it. Naomi Klein bravely makes it, but it's part of the shock doctrine that's gone around the world, creating terror in different societies, particularly Latin America. They began to experiment with this, and I believe the United States is next in this step that you shock the heck out of the people, and then you begin to take their minerals, their fresh water, etc. And the rich get even richer very quickly, and the natives are left with nothing.
Yeah, my research leads me to think that it depends on what path you follow, but that the clandestine government in Israel and the United States and the United Kingdom are all part beneath something much bigger called the Warburg Cartel. It's a guy named Lee and China and Warburg and Rothschild. And it's really not a matter just of the intelligence or the elite of a single country, but this is an international cartel that runs everything and is financed by heroin and arms and people trade. And they keep people, like you say, Glenn, fighting and keep it going as much as possible. But it isn't just Israel. It's everywhere, in my opinion.
But a great point to make is that Israel was created by England. Lord Balfour, after the First World War, made the Balfour Declaration back in 1919 that foretold of an Israeli state that, of course, needed Hitler in order to actually bring it to reality. But a history teacher I respected back, my daughter's high school history professor was the person who said, of all the places to put the Jews, let's put them where they're hated the worst and see what happens, because both, I think, Wyoming and Uganda offered homeland to the Jews in the Second World War. and those weren't
Oh
options.
my gosh!
Let's put them. And instead of putting them in the Midwest United States or in Uganda, where they have lots of space to do what they want to do, let's put them there. So where they're
wow.
But didn't they want to go there? Part of the story that I recall, and I could be wrong, is that there was some attraction because it is this holy land, and that goes all the way back to the Anunnaki, and
that's
all
right.
the stuff and that's why they wanted that space in Jerusalem, because it's kind of lost in time what was so important, but it's important
but it was a mistake.
The Anunnaki.
Beverly Hills was the place they really should have gone. Not Jerusalem.
The Clampets? The Clampets, you mean?
Aren't a lot of them in Beverly Hills? All right. So anyway, and here this Jewish population. It's only 1% of the world's population is Jewish or something. It's such a small percentage, and yet they're scapegoats of the planet.
Well, if we go back to Israel, there are two different schools of Judaism there. One came from the Caucasus Mountains. A Caucasian, very advanced, highly intelligent race came in there, and they're the ones who desire some kind of a dominant role, a Zionist kind of role for Israel. The other ones believe in a peaceful environment. The other Hebrew or rabbis believe in a peaceful environment, that Israel should represent a land of peace and high spiritual advancement, and that's. The first group takes dominance, in my opinion, in what happens in Israel. And as soon as you attack them, of course, you're an anti-Semite. Well, I don't think that I am. I went to a largely Jewish law school. Lots of my friends were Jewish. I don't think I'm an anti-Semite. I just look to see why they're fighting over Israel. They're on the Dome of the Rock, where they claim Muhammad ascended. King Solomon's temple was supposed to have been there, but there's no evidence that King Solomon's temple was there. They're fighting over what's underneath Temple Mount, because the Knights Templar dug down there at the request of St. Hildegard de Bingen, a psychic, and, by the way, a female. Imagine that.
Yay,
and
female.
They were told by her where to dig and what they were going to find, and they found it. And no, we're not too sure today what it was. I think I have some ideas what it was, but and now the idea is what's under Temple Mount. Never mind who ascended from there, and that Jesus was there, and that Muhammad was there. What's under Temple Mount is what everybody seems to be fighting about, in my opinion.
Well, let's roll back the clock. So the Temple Mount and from the Anunnaki stories, Dr. Lesson, who had control of that? Wasn't that Ninmah-Ningishzidda? Was
yes, at different times. I don't know if I'm still being recorded, but at one time, they had given her Jerusalem and the Sinai because she was trying to keep Enlil's forces and Enki and Marduk's forces apart. And then after the bombing, just before the bombing, Adad for a while was in charge of Jerusalem. On Mount Mashu is where they had the controls. It was like the Houston is, control central. For the landing on the Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula was named after Nanar. His Akkadian name was Sin. And but Enlil, in one of his temperamental fits, bombed the cities south of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, and totally bombed the Sinai runway and ruined the everything that was inside Mount Sinai. But still, under Jerusalem, many of the Anunnaki had their records, and including it was called the Heaven-Earth Bond, the ability to speak instantaneously with Nibiru. And Moses had even indicated about this. He could have Aaron's descendants go in and ask yes/no answers. They had to be careful of the radiation because there was a kind of power source in there. But I digress.
That's great, because what I'm asking is those huge rocks that are over there in Jerusalem, they were put in place because that was the land they had. That's why we have these gigantic rocks, and that's part of the Wailing Wall, and so it's so ancient. That was for the flood. So we're talking 20? We don't know when it started, but it was.
It was a landing platform. Yeah, it was a landing platform.
It was actually flood. Was it flood, was it active after the flood? We're about the Noah's flood of 11,500 BC.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah, way after. Yeah, way after.
Very interesting, because now they always project that the big, massive foundation that is Temple Mount is somehow related to the first temple of Solomon. But my research shows they never really knew where the first temple of Solomon, and they keep pointing to this massive foundation as likely the base.
Well,
so what
Enki
Dr.
would
Lessin
have
is
been
saying
a
is
part
quite...
of building that. Enki would have been a part of building that. He's the one that came down here and set up the infrastructure. And of course, back in those days, Enlil was cooperating. The Enki and Enlil at one point were, they're brothers, but, now they're fighting. But at one point, they were cooperating because they were here establishing Earth base in Biru.
Yeah, one had the land and one had the water. So they could coexist.
But there was something else. It was called the NEs, which are like computer programs, but they're...
Hey, come in here, and sweetheart, your bed's really bad. Come in here. We've got this back and running. Put your headphone on and hang up the phone because you're really coming in garbled. Okay? Here he comes. So go ahead and just bear with us for 1 minute.
Structure.
Okay. Come in, honey. Back to Glenn while we're waiting for him. I'm not sure where he went.
That's okay. That's okay. I can carry on.
Carry on until I don't know what happened.
Well, Temple Mount, which you say Enki can build this way, but in my book 4, The Black Madonna of the Isis series, I take the position that King Solomon was a code name for Enki, as was Jesus Christ. His original royal title is Jesus Christos. But Enki and Solomon and Jesus Christ were both known as the Tecton, which is not carpenter. It's not builder in wood. It's a builder in stone. And so we see these massive stone structures all around the edges of the water around the world. The reports from the ancient cultures are some white guy with a beard showed up here with his half-sister and taught us how to build all this stuff.
Right, because the major builder was Enki's son, Ningishzidda. He's the one that designed the city of Egypt and all the pyramids. Honey, here's your mic. Go ahead. What were you going to say? I'm sorry to disrupt you. Go on.
I don't know. I've lost the conversation. I was not able to hear, honey.
Talking about the builders of stone and the foundation of the spaceport. It might have been Temple Mount.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, so we were talking about the Temple Mound and who built that. So
the Anunnaki built it, for sure.
Yeah, so which particular Anunnaki built wasn't it the Ningishzidda who was the major...
Ningishzidda at that point, he was
architect.
matrifiliated with Enlil. You have to understand that his mother was Erishkigal, whose father was Nanar, whose father was Enlil. So that he went over, when all the other Enkiites went in the pyramid and fought against Inanna and that they're coming against him. Ningishzidda refused. He said, I'm an artist. I'm an architect. I'm not going to do this fighting stuff. And so that part of the deal of the peace that Ninmah negotiated is that Marduk, instead of being killed, would be exiled, and that Enki could still keep control of Africa, but he would have to give Egypt now, instead of to Marduk or Ra, he would now have to give that to Thoth, to Ningishzidda. And so that was the deal. And so Ningishzidda was not necessarily, from that point on, Ningishzidda went and designed the wonderful temple for Ninmah, great his new airplane, his new fighter plane, and it's like this was it. He went over to the other side. He helped Adad and Ninurta build a temple. He made down at Tehuacan, and he was architecting for everybody. He loved his job. He wasn't a fighter.
To you, Glenn.
Go.
Wake up, Glenn. What are you doing?
When Sasha goes on that roll, man, they just go into awe because Because this is the anchor of history. I'm a historian. I have a master's degree in history, but this anchor is what's completely missing from our knowledge. We go from about the time of maybe 500 BC, and maybe a little bit before that with Solomon and David and Abraham running around with Moses. I'm not too sure when that happened, but go back maybe 1400 BC and start coming forward. But we have nothing in that period of these monoliths that are built all over the world and what they mean and who built them and who did it. That's the anchor. That's the dog, right. And what we have since then is the tail. But under Israel's influence throughout the world of Judaism, I guess rabbinical scholars, we have the period from 500 BC forward being the dog and the old stuff being the tail. And, right. and the great legend, the great story being told by Jesus Christos, I think it's in the book of Luke, is that don't pour the new wine into old wineskins, they'll burst. And the Catholic took that to mean that, just believe in the New Testament only. And then Luke goes on and says, no, they'll burst. Don't pour them in there because the old is better. And that's never repeated in my Catholic training or any church that I was in, any mass I was in the Catholic Church. The old is better. And so to go back to this period before 500 BC, before 1000 BC, as we're finding out now, that human beings have been here for at least, I think this is the fifth root race that we have. And all five were destroyed. We're in the fifth one now, heading to the sixth. And will we begin to move over to the female who knows how to save the earth and how to save humanity and how to ascend and how to get to the Stargate? That's sewn into the cells and DNA of the females.
So you sent me a line. You said, let's see, on this show we feature the most advanced information in the world. What is the connection between the woman who appeared at Lourdes and Fatima and the Anunnaki, and why is she warning us that the Vatican will, and then you didn't finish the sentence. What was the Vatican
I was dictating on my phone. The fact that the Vatican will lose the faith. And she predicts
lose the faith, okay.
So what the faith is and what was lost, we don't know. But that was in the 1840s at La Salette. And at La Salette, her name was Calvé, the young girl. And this is when she warned the popes, and she was quite strident about it, that the church would lose its faith, and of course she was crushed. And that Lourdes came, and at Lourdes she appears with the Immaculate Conception. And the Catholic Church has come up with this concept 4 years earlier that the Virgin Mary was also born without sin. Not only was Jesus Christ born with no sperm, his mother had no sin. The problem being with that the concept of sin was not invented until 500 later by St. Augustine, but that when she was running around the planet, she had no sin too. That's their version of conception.
If it was Parthenogenesis, he would be a girl.
What's that?
If Jesus was born by Parthenogenesis, he would be a girl.
Is that how it works, honey? I don't.
Of course. Don't you know how, James? Yeah, if a person doesn't have an XY and an XX coming together, the progeny will be female.
Sasha, this is no time for science. This is radio show. What's the matter with you?
All right, so Jesus is a girl, but maybe he's.
But the story at Lourdes was that she announced the Immaculate Conception, which, in my opinion, goes back to the virgin birth in Ethiopia in the genetics lab, which she did in a petri dish, and put advanced sperm from their planet into the ovum of the ape from Africa, beast from Africa. And that's the Immaculate Conception that has then been covered over since then. That's the faith that would become lost, real science, because now we have the DNA from the National Geographic Society, imagine that, the Geographic Project, run by a scholar who is Oxford, Harvard, and Stanford trained. His name is Spencer Wells, and it's unmistakable now, using mitochondria, the female, that we've only been here 200,000 years. And so that was 2006 and still has not made the front page of the New York Times, although I don't know why. And
Wasn't
so from
it
Lords we moved
in Time magazine though? I remember reading that.
Yeah,
in one of the, I think this Time or Newsweek.
Snips of it here and there, but not dominating. What we got in Pennsylvania was the Dover monkey trial, which was the Scopes monkey trial from Tennessee repeated, and the DNA scientists of Darwin, the Darwinists, winning again in Pennsylvania, where I was living at the time, in the Dover trial, I guess in the early 90s.
This is just another one of these spurious arguments that the evolutionists have become, have a religion of their own, basically, and they run out of town or kick out of the synod of academia anyone who says, let's look at the evidence at how all the species would come in suddenly as though this place was terraformed. And in the Cambrian, all the species that we have came, and that there hasn't been any evolution. There's been initiation and differentiation, but the major genera have never evolved into anything else. And the idea that evolution is what has governed this planet, it's not evolution or creationism. It's some of each. It's adaptation plus genetic engineering or creationism by very intelligent geneticists who wanted to do better than where they came from and make superior people. And believe it or not, that's what we are capable of once we bring our left and right hemispheres back together. And we do that using ritual and female Amrita and tantric ritual. And the problem, when they made these children, they did these incantations. They weren't just having sex, and when they were making these babies in the test tube and implanting them, they were doing spiritual rituals, getting as high as they possibly could, and transmitting all that to this fetus who became Tiamat, who was the first conscious human being, the first Eve.
And if Sitchin's correct, it was the two daughters of Eve that Enki fornicated with. And
that's
at that
right.
point, going to Homo sapiens sapiens. It's a term, Sasha, I used to hear quite a bit when I was a younger man. I'm 58 now, but when I was a younger man, I used to hear Homo sapiens sapiens quite a bit. And now I don't read it that much anymore. We're all Homo sapiens. But a huge jump occurred again, did it not, to Homo sapiens sapiens?
Absolutely. Enki decided that he was going to create these very, very special, intelligent beings that would carry his particular line down. And these two daughters, and by daughters they mean it could have been descendant a long time because they had a bigger thing, but two daughters are descendants of the original Eve. Enki had made babies with, and these babies were called Adapa and Titi. And Adapa and Titi got all the attention of the highest Anunnaki. So these people were so well educated. Adapa ran the earth for Enki. He took all the statistics. He made sure that the boats and planes came back from gold in Africa, brought them up to Batibara in Iran, and he trained all the workers, and he trained the mine workers and the bakers, and this guy was a genius, and he was flying an airplane. When the king of Nibiru heard from Enlil's spies that this guy Adapa was flying an airplane, he said, "Go get this creature. I want to see him." And they brought him to Nibiru with a couple of Enki's sons, Ninmah and Ningishzidda, and Enki had slipped him a tablet saying, "Hey, Pop, we can't give the people. They're too smart. We really can't give them long life. And besides that, Enlil's going to kill the project if he thinks we're trying to do any more. So send Adapa back. I want him to breed lots and lots and lots of kids." And incidentally, the first kids that Titi bore were Cain and Abel, but then they had lots of kids after that, and their kids had kids with the kids' and so forth. So Adapa came back, and he lived a long, long time. And this is our potential. This is who we can become. This is Leonardo. This is what we are capable of.
I think what's important to point out here is that this next generation was Enki purposely selected these two daughters of Eve, and it was his sperm, and he copulated. There was something about the whole process. He could have just inseminated them, but he physically copulated with them for some reason.
He loved them,
and he was turned on by them. And he didn't have another Anunnaki. He didn't have his son Ningishzidda do this next injection of Anunnaki DNA. He did it himself, and that up-leveled, humanity from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens, which means Homo sapiens were kind of, I don't want to, I know this is a term that gets everybody excited. They were devolving in that they were just returning to nature. They didn't want to be in the cities in this structure. They wanted to be more, it's kind of like what people happen to when they come to Maui. They go to nature. They go to the beach. They don't.
It was evolving from the point of view of their slave masters,
right,
but from their own point of view, they were intelligent out of slavery and going back to nature, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, they weren't really generating a kind of civilization. They weren't progressing in that. They were having a happy life, but they were just in kind of a relaxation mode. So with the influx of the Enki's DNA, they were more. Well, first of all, Titi became enlightened and then conscious aware that she was a being, not an animal.
Oh, absolutely. Damkina made her like a daughter, took her with her everywhere, just made sure she learned everything.
Great. Glenn, back to you. Our original commitment was an hour. We have 2 minutes and 23 seconds left. What would you like to say?
Well, once again, as I tried to describe the show tonight, would be the most advanced knowledge in the world. And I think that's really holding up, and that we cover a lot of ground. And as we keep going over the next months, we'll fill in more and more. But it's a huge structure from the time of not even 10,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, coming up until today. There's a huge amount of knowledge to encapsulate on this show, but we're finding our way that to the point that now it's the female's time to take over. As of December 17th of last fall, 2013, we're in the age of Aquarius, and that is the water bearer. And we'll maybe discuss in the next show what that means for humanity.
That sounds great, yes. Well, I wanted to invite you, I don't know what you're doing tomorrow, but tomorrow morning we have a very special show, and we have to do it in the morning because we have Andy Lloyd from the UK who's going to be on our show tomorrow. And let's see, it's from 10 to 11 Hawaii, so translate that. That's 10, 11, 1, 2, 3 to 4 Eastern, I think, if I have it right. We're going to have Andy Lloyd, and you might want to come back, Glenn, because this is the astronomer. We have a couple more minutes. Actually, we can go over a little bit. Tell our audience and tell Glenn who Andy Lloyd is.
Andy Lloyd has put all the astronomy information together to show that Nemesis, the binary star that is in a dynamic interaction with Earth, but we can't see directly because there's too many bright things around it, has been clearly indicated by all kinds of infrared and other kinds of imaging. And Nibiru is a planet that rotates around Nemesis, just as our planet, Earth, is a planet that rotates around Solaris. And Nibiru crosses into our inner atmosphere between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt, which is the remains of a collision that Nibiru and its moon had created, as it passes through, and it does, some of the times, depending on where Earth is in terms of its rotation, it causes great disturbances on Earth, probably caused the flood that wiped out the Egyptians that were chasing Moses, and it probably caused a great deluge of 13,000 years ago. And so Andy's got a handle on all the astronomy. He's really up on it, and he's got lots of these really cool amateurs that are telling him what's really going on, that the government's trying to hush up. And what he's saying is that Nemesis is coming closer and closer, and all the planets are getting closer to Solaris, and everything's heating up. And sure, we are in climate heating by our pollution, but 85% of it, Andy says, is caused by the nearing of all the planets closer to Solaris.
Okay, back to you, Glenn. Final words before we sign off tonight.
And the focal point of that attraction is the Earth. And this is why there's 7 billion people here, and they are lined up from here to who knows where to get on this planet for this great period coming ahead. The greatest time of all history of mankind to be on the planet is right now.
Right. It's the greatest show in the universe.
And so we'll take it up tomorrow.
Okay, we will see you then, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. This has been your host, Janet Lessin, and we say goodbye, Glenn, to our audience.
Good night.
Buenas noches.
Much love and aloha.